Welcome to this explainer. Think about it for a second. If you used GPS today, or even just checked the weather on your phone, you relied on space. Well, today we're going to decode a totally fascinating intersection where that everyday cutting-edge technology slams right into national security. We're looking at how a deep collaboration between super agile space tech startups and the armed forces is completely reshaping not just defense strategies, but global business as we know it. So if you've ever wondered how the space race evolved from those old-school government agencies to private startups and now straight to the military front lines, you are definitely in the right place.
All right, let's just quickly run through our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting the new space battlefield, SpaceX's military blueprint, India's defense space play, the startup vanguard, the defense business case, and we'll wrap it all up with the road ahead. Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the new space battlefield.
To really get why domestic space tech is blowing up the way it is right now, we first have to recognize a massive, fundamental shift in how the world actually views the cosmos. Kari Abinjan, over at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, really hit the nail on the head with this quote. Basically, space is no longer just this serene, empty vacuum for peaceful exploration or academic research. It has absolutely become a critical operational domain. Just like the ocean or our airspace, it's a territory that nations now feel they absolutely have to monitor, utilize, and defend.
And that brings us to the core of our source material today, a recent deep dive report from the Economic Times, fittingly titled Star Wars. It details how the infrastructure floating up there in space essentially underpins all of our critical national security functions now. We're talking communications, navigation, intelligence gathering, precision targeting, the whole shebang. Literally, if a military loses its space assets today, its modern operations essentially go blind. So look, this strategic shift, it comes with massive, massive economic weight. The global satellite communications market just touched $25 billion in 2025. And when you factor in that global military spending is projected to hit over $6.6 trillion by 2035, yes, trillion with a T, let that sink in for a second. You really start to see the scale of this. We're looking at a highly lucrative, incredibly high-stakes ecosystem where bleeding-edge technology and giant defense budgets are just colliding at unprecedented speeds. Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, SpaceX's military blueprint. Now, this whole integration of private space tech and military defense, it's not some far-off theory. It's already been proven on the global stage. The source outlines 5 key X factors for SpaceX's blueprint, and it's basically a masterclass in how a private commercial company can become an indispensable geopolitical tool. I mean, they aren't just launching rockets, they are the Pentagon's absolute key launch partner. Look at Starlink providing totally resilient wartime communications in Ukraine. They even went ahead and built Starshield specifically for government defense. Plus, their reusable rockets mean they can rapidly replace damaged satellites for way cheaper, and their future Starship could fundamentally transform how military cargo is moved around the globe. Right now, this is the absolute gold standard for defense space operations. Moving right along to Section 3, India's defense space play. So, with that towering global benchmark set by SpaceX, how does a country like India respond? Well, historically, nations just relied on these giant, slow-moving, traditional space agencies. But the Indian government actually recognized the need for serious speed and innovation here, so they proactively launched the iDEX scheme. It's essentially designed to directly integrate agile, fast-moving startups right into the national defense apparatus. It's a huge fundamental shift away from trying to build everything in-house to instead sourcing the absolute best tech directly from the private sector. And you can actually see this policy playing out in real time with startups like Pixel. They recently secured a major grant under this exact scheme to build custom capabilities for the Indian Air Force. We're talking about miniaturized satellites packing electro-optical, infrared, and synthetic aperture radar payloads. This isn't just some theoretical lab research, you know? This is a private startup building highly specific tactical hardware for the military. And that brings us to Section 4, the startup vanguard. But here's the really exciting part. Pixel is absolutely not doing this alone. The on-defense radar ecosystem in India is booming with a whole vanguard of dynamic companies stepping up to meet these strategic national needs. There is just an incredible breadth of focus areas being tackled right now.
You've got Pixel and Galaxy doing hardcore Earth observation. You've got Digantara mapping space situational awareness, which is basically acting like air traffic control for space traffic and debris. All the way down to Agnicool and Skyroot handling the launch services and PureSight doing maritime surveillance. It's like a giant puzzle coming together, a robust end-to-end domestic supply chain being built right before our eyes.
Let's dig into the money in Section 5, the defense business case.
Now, you might be wondering, why are all these cutting-edge startups pivoting so heavily toward the military instead of, say, commercial agriculture or mining? Well, the answer lies in the harsh realities of business fundamentals. According to Pixel's founder, Awais Ahmed, across certain parts of his company, a staggering 60 to 70% of current revenues are coming directly from national security programs. For a young space company, finding reliable, deep-pocketed customers in the commercial sector can literally take years. Defense agencies? They have the budgets, and they have an immediate, pressing need for these capabilities today.
And no, it is definitely not just Pixel. For the space situational awareness startup Digantara, their founder Anirudh Sharma notes that nearly 80% of their revenue comes directly from defense-related contracts. 80%. That is huge. The military isn't just some side hustle for these companies. Right now, it is their primary economic engine. And you know who loves reliable revenue flows? Venture capitalists. This massive shift has seriously caught the attention of heavy-hitting deep tech and venture capital funds. We're seeing major players like PeakXV, GIC, Reliance, Bloom Ventures, and Lightspeed actively deploying capital into this space. They're looking at those defense contracts and realizing, hey, defense tech is no longer a niche, risky bet. It's actually a highly viable, scalable investment category. The sources actually called this incredibly interesting phenomenon the Israel route, which I find fascinating. Instead of building a commercial product and just crossing your fingers that the government buys it eventually, this model flips the script entirely. Startups first prove their technology with incredibly demanding military customers. The defense forces deeply test the products under extreme, real-world parameters, and once the tech survives that crucible, it's basically guaranteed to be top tier. That makes it infinitely easier to later pivot, sell into the global commercial market, and build those multi-billion-dollar companies. Finally, let's look at Section 6, the road ahead. Okay, so it's not all smooth sailing, right? The journey to becoming an independent, global space tech power definitely has its hurdles. The biggest one identified by the founders themselves is the nature of the funding. Early developmental grants from the government, like those under the iDEX scheme we talked about, are a fantastic start. They get the prototypes built. But founders note that India needs to quickly adopt a model closer to the US. Actually, they need to move from one-off grants to providing continuous, long-term, multi-million-dollar operational contracts. Without that steady, predictable, long-term procurement, it is incredibly difficult for these capital-intensive companies to scale up their manufacturing and truly compete on a global level. So that leaves us with a pretty massive question to wrap up this explainer. As this deep collaboration between agile startups and the military grows, will governments evolve their funding models fast enough? Can they actually transition from just seeding innovation to becoming reliable long-term customers? Because ultimately, securing these startups' financial futures might just be the exact same thing as securing a country's strategic independence up there in the stars. It's an absolutely fascinating space to watch, and I hope this explainer helped you see the brilliant mechanics working behind the headlines. Keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.